Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nedling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Nedling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I'm real excited to have with me Mike Martin, and let me tell you about Mike. So following a series of life-changing events, Mike turned to nature to find the inner peace that could help him heal himself and rebuild his life. After enduring a difficult divorce that left him feeling lost and adrift, Mike realized that he needed to make a change. So he decided to take an extended sabbatical from work and embarked on a solo backpacking trip into the mountains. As Mike spent his days hiking through lush forest and his nights sleeping under the stars, he began to sense a tranquility that had eluded him for so long. Disconnecting from the stress of his normal routine and immersing himself in the simple beauty of his natural surroundings brought him a feeling of calm. Sitting beside a serene mountain lake, reflecting the pinks and oranges of stunning sunset, Mike felt his anxiety and his heartache start to lift. He was reminded of the resilience of nature and how it endures through every season. With each passing day spent foraging for food and purifying water from the streams, Mike felt his inner strength return, and the solitude of the wilderness cleared his mind, while the physical demands of hiking and climbing focused his energy. And the more time he spent out in nature, the more he could feel his spirit mending. So we are going to take time today to talk about healing through adventure. Please join me in welcoming Mike Martin to a great conversation about what you could do to heal through an adventure. Mike, such a great time to have you here on these hot summer days. People are outdoors more often in the summer, but I love the fact that you're bringing us back to nature. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. You know, that is like the most beautiful introduction I've ever had from anybody.
Oh, thank you very much. I thought it was written beautifully by you. I mean, you should be an author. It just was so well done. But we are going to get into this with two easy first questions. And the first is always tell us, where do you call home? Where do you lay in your hat right now?
So at the moment, I'm in Michigan, which is where I was born and raised, around the Metro Detroit area. I call home actually nowadays my truck.
Yeah.
Ironically enough, because before all that beautiful journey stuff, there was a lot of turmoil that I ended up finding myself homeless, and it just became natural.
Yeah.
So I've learned to not only embrace it, but love it.
You know, I've interviewed probably, I don't know now, 8 or 10 nomads, how they just decided, I'm just going to see the world. I'm going to live where I live, experience the world and the diversity of it every day. And so I would say that that's what you are. You are one of our entrepreneur nomads. And I'll add you to my list. I am going to write a book of just nomads because I think it's just so intriguing how you can, run a business and have a life that you are in control of.
I think the coolest part about that though is based off of what I do. I get the opportunity to really authentically live. It was not just that little portion of my life where I needed to take some time to reconnect with myself. It actually worked into how I live my daily life. So being able to share that story and the things that come out of it, it's a privilege, it's an honor, but it's also very awe-inspiring in the response and the impact it has on people.
Yeah. So eh, I gave, a bit about the story, but at what point when you had all of this reflection, time to reflect and get back to nature and start to figure out who you are, what you wanted to do, when was it decided, I'm going to start these projects and these camps and these hiking excursions and things to help other people get through some of the pain, the anguish, that journey that you had?
Well, this is where I take that softness of the beautiful part that you've read off and just be blunt and honest with it. It came about after a botched suicide attempt.
Wow.
And when I woke up the next day, I stumbled onto the Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. And I went from thinking suicide was terminal, like cancer in my world, to, man, this is just adversity and challenge that
Mhm.
if I can navigate it, I can teach my kids the most important life lesson that there is, that adversity is something you should embrace and just make part of your journey. And from there, I discovered meditation as I started to do that, and I started talking with other people that I'd engaged with on the trails about it. And they're like, that's a really crazy concept, but I can see and I can feel it. And then we started exploring it a little bit more. And I built the program, I built the initial steps around it. And I also launched my own podcast talking about it and all this based off of it was a podcast that introduced me to that book.
Mhm.
And that was what I accredit to saving my life and changing my whole world. So it was just
Mhm.
the heartfelt motivation of wanting to put something positive into the world because I received something so positive, life changing.
And you mentioned your kids, and I didn't talk about your family at all, but how many kids do you have?
I have four. I have
And
two boys and two girls.
ah, well, I came from a family with seven. I only have two girls, but I've got two grandsons, so I kind of got that same exposure to the the boy energy and the girl energy. But you talked about the fact, that impact of your life. Oftentimes, I think we think it's just me, but it isn't. When you're a dad or a mom, uh, you got other people that count on you, that you hope, that look up to you, that learn from you. So, how powerful was that relationship that for you to keep solid, um, driving you to where you are today?
Well, I mean, those four relationships are what keep me alive nowadays. Even during when I have challenging moments now, it's those voices in my heart that
Mhm.
inspire me to continue to go forward. So I would say that, overall they are the center of my world. That's where I draw my energy and my love
Mhm.
for life from. So
Yeah, I agree. So I often talk about how courage is really what builds confidence. And, my whole podcast is about building leadership confidence, but it's really confidence in anything that we do. You don't have to be the head of a big industry to be a leader and need confidence. So talk to me about the time when you decided to take that extended sabbatical from work and do this backpacking trip. I mean, I'm sure there were a lot of people, family and friends, that are like, "What are you doing, Mike?"
it's a funny story, and it starts probably a couple of months beforehand because at that point, like I said, I was recovering, emotionally from everything I had gone through before all those traumas. And I got into talk therapy. And I had a therapy session where my therapist talked about meditation. And I looked at her like she was stupid. I'm
Mm.
like, this is me. I'm not going to shave my head. I'm not buying one of those 1998 chant CDs. None of that. That's so far fetched. And then I went around back and I grabbed my crossbow and did my nightly practice. And everything that I fought against was within my practice and my routine for shooting. So it hit me. I can do this meditation thing. This has got to be as good as she's telling me. But then again, in sight of the context of everyday life, there's that story of suffering and, that stigmas we still put on everything. So
Mm.
I was like, I can't sit at home and do this. I can't sit here and, sit still and go, or whatever. Let me go out into nature. Nature is that place to
Yeah.
me that is safe. Everything that I'm going to encounter out there, even other human beings, we ain't got time to look at each other and tell stories. We're out, humans out there enjoying the experience. The animals and the plants and the trees, they're out there living life in the moment. And that to me just resonated so much. And it gave me the opportunity to really reflect and
Mhm.
really decide that there was a symbolic aspect to when I made that suicide attempt. Obviously with it not working and my life was meant to go on,
Yeah.
but there's many different forms of death. And it's okay, just like an onion, to peel the layers away and let them go as
Mhm.
you no longer need them or as they no longer serve you. And that's what that was. And throughout the course of that, it really made me focus in on the self-talk, the way that I talk to myself.
Yeah.
Because I was always a very negative person before that. And I was one of the things I would always say to anybody when they would say something negative towards me was, man, you can't do or say anything to me that I can't do or say worse to myself.
Mm.
And being out in nature like that, and a lot of what I credited to was walking around with a hatchet, crafting camp for the night and getting firewood together and this and that. It built self-confidence. It built self-worth
Mhm.
based off skills I already had. So as that started to come together and the ball started rolling, all of a sudden that self-talk started to change, and
Yeah.
it became a little bit softer and a little bit softer. And then it always started to turn into finding the positive
Yeah.
aspects of whatever the situation was.
So true. And I love that you shared in your bio that you found disconnecting from stress of your normal routine and immersing yourself in the simple beauty of the nature surrounding you brought the feeling of calm. Uh, as you were just talking, I kind of was reflecting on whenever I was young. Um, my mom's family had 60-acre piece of land and a small, we called it the farm, but there was just a small garden that we had compared to farming communities. But it had a lot of woods and so I used to go off. I came from a big family and it was not unusual for me just to go walking in the woods away from all of the noise of all the kids and everybody else to just like reflect on things and to be quiet. I think there's so much noise in the world today, and everybody has to be doing something, listening to something, that they kind of lose that ability to just sit quietly. And I think when you talk about meditation, I think to me, meditation isn't the kind of thing that you were talking about, but it really is to be able to just let your mind stay open. And I find I do my best thinking when I do simple mindless tasks, like sweeping the floor or doing dishes, where I'm not concentrating on past problems or current problems. I'm just, focusing on this simple task. And then all of a sudden, my problems sometimes get solved.
That's something when I wrote that piece in the bio, I reflected on my hunting experiences
Yeah.
because there's a byproduct of getting out there and doing the adventure of the hunt is you sit in isolation. We think we crave it within the context of the world we're safe and everything, but there's also a scary aspect of it that I remember drastically trying to distract myself all the time from, and that's the sitting alone part, because
Mm-hmm.
you never know what's gonna come up. So we always try to keep that mind going. And I've noticed a lot in recent weeks with the people that I've taken out on trails and hikes and stuff. They jump in on the adventure idea because they're like, this is going to be a great way to
Get
just
in
spend a couple
shape.
hours, get in shape, and as I call it, balance the circle.
Yeah.
But they always come to me and they get hung up on the meditative part. They're always like, I've got this hamster wheel going on, especially when I'm working with people that are on a recovery journey,
Yeah.
because they don't know how to slow the mind down.
Mm.
So they're intimidated by the aspect of sitting still. They're like, I can never do that. And then we put the backpacks on, we start walking, and I start getting them to pay attention a little bit to the ground, to
Yeah.
feel their foot actually hit the ground and feel the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a way to tease in somebody to the idea of walking meditation.
Mm-hmm.
So as you start to feel the ground and you start to work your way up and you notice your leg movements and how that feels, and you work your way up your body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that a lot of people, as they experience it, they're kind of shocked that they're actually able to do that.
Yeah.
But then, to get to the actual sit down guided meditation aspect of a day's adventure, by the time we've hit, the third or fourth mile of a hike and we sit down to really hydrate and snack, they're kind of tired.
Yeah.
Their brain is slowed down and
Mm-hmm.
they're ready for a break. So it's easier to bring them and ease them into the aspect of sitting down and focusing and following along on whatever the story or the adventure even aspect of
Mm-hmm.
the way that I present a guided meditation. That even after that, they're like, dude, I can really do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the same thing that I had when I was playing around with my crossbow that night. So when I get that kind of feedback, it warms my heart.
Yeah.
It makes my soul feel good because I'm able to introduce these concepts that have all these stigmas or whatever somebody puts around it, and they feel like it's so untouchable.
Yeah.
But in reality, we all do it in one way
Mm.
or another.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of honing it to become a skill and a practice so it can help you grow.
So is this what you're describing, what you call the wilderness meditation?
Yes, this is the wilderness experience, or mindful hiking, as
Mm-hmm.
some people refer to it. And I do it in a group setting, but I also do it in the a one-on-one environment where we go on an actual backpacking trip for 2 or 3, 4 days, whatever they're comfortable with. And I've always kind of tailored it in a way in my head when I was putting it together to where it was about the person that I was out there with. I want to make it as comfortable and easy for them as it is, because when you go out on a trip like that, most people that I work with, they've got that fear.
Mm-hmm.
And the overall moral of the story or of the adventure is to tease your way through that fear, to sit in the uncomfortable ass side of things and
Yeah.
realize, yeah, maybe I'm leaning on somebody for a little bit of help or whatever the case may be, but I'm actually out here living this adventure. I'm actually out here enjoying this experience.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I know from my personal journey, and I see it in other people's eyes all the time, it's when you get out and you actually live these experiences that you're able to put two and two together, or assemble the lumber and the material to build a bridge to climb over a river.
Mm-hmm.
You make these gigantic leaps in a safe and fun environment, and they stick. So when you come back into the office or you come back into your daily life and all the different stresses come at you, it becomes easier to cope with it. It
Yeah.
becomes easier to deal with, and ultimately you're able to comfortably and safely express that picture of who you are within your heart.
Yeah, it sounds like you gave them the tools that they would need to be successful. I wonder if you could share any of the after that 2 or 3 or 4 day hike, what are some of the reactions or the aha moments that some of your clients might have?
Well, I mean, the aha moments revolve around the fact that it's safe to embrace those feelings or those
Mhm.
emotions, regardless of what they are. If they're like depression, if they're anxiety that you suffer from, you learn how by putting the physical work in, and then turning around, sitting with those feelings and reflecting on them. You don't have to look at it as I suffer from. You're
Mm.
able to remove the labels. You're able to understand that everything within you or everything you experience is a part of the journey, and you should embrace it.
Mhm.
You should enjoy it. And even when I have conversations with people and I bring those ideas up, they're almost foreign to most people at the beginning of the conversation. I just had one yesterday. Actually, I was involved in a roundtable discussion, and I was almost like the black sheep of the table. I totally didn't fit in with any of them. We had the one guy that was on there suffered from bipolar syndrome, and his reaction to it and the way that he talked about and taught other people was to essentially shame yourself for it,
Mm.
to silence it, to be so concerned about that label and the way that you express it that it becomes who you are.
Mhm.
And I listened to him, and he made a semi-valid case. And then I came back and I asked him, I was like, so what is the benefit of silencing who you are,
Mm.
silencing your own voice? It's challenging, and it's a very difficult road. I call it the hardest road,
Yeah.
to stand up, remove the mask, and actually embrace who you are.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, when you come out of that wilderness, or you come out of that forest of doing the reflection and the work to get there, it is the most beautiful change in life. I know I'm kind of carrying on a little bit, but this is like a subject I'm very passionate about.
Oh, that's how you're fine.
And and I had this talk that I've given to many people and many groups, where I use myself as an example, because as I grew up through life, there came a point where one day there was a knock on my door. I went and answered it. At the door stood depression. He pushed me to the side and he walked in. Spent a couple of days telling me what I was going to do.
Mm.
And then when he got bored, he got up and he left. Now, he didn't give me a thank you. I'll see you next time, anything like that. But then he came back a couple weeks later, knocked on the door. I opened it. He pushed his way in. This time he had a bag of groceries with him. And he went into my kitchen. He replaced my groceries with the things that he liked to eat and told me what I was going to eat. Then he turned around. He left again without saying goodbye. He come back a third time. This time he brought a suitcase with him. As he pushed me to the side, come in, he walked into my closet and he replaced all my camouflage shirts with his dark colored shirts. Told me that's what I was going to wear, what I was going to do. While he hung out, those couple of days, I figured out what depression was doing. So I got up one day, I sat down at the kitchen table, and I said, "Depression, you got to sit down. We got to have a talk." So depression sat down, and as we talked, I told him, I understand that you feel you need to come here. I accept that, and you're more than welcome to come. But when you do, from now on, we can't play by your rules anymore. We're going to play by mine. And after I said that, depression stood up, and he looked at me and said, "You know what? I respect you." And I thought for a minute, and I looked back and I'm like, "You respect me?" And he says, "Yes, because you stood up to me finally." And then he got up and he left. He come back a couple of weeks later, knocked on the door again, and he asked if he could come in. And I invited him in. And we sat at the table, had a cup of coffee, good conversation. And then after a couple hours, I said, "Depression, it's time that you get up and you leave." And it's that sort of example of making friends with those feelings and
Yeah.
just being one, because you can't separate yourself from them.
Mm.
When you do that, you hide behind a mask and you live disconnected. You miss so much
Yeah.
of the world.
Yeah. You just are a shell of a person. You're not hiding, you're not owning up to who you are. And if you have somebody that's, if your mind is telling you one thing and you're accepting it, not challenging it, I think that's why I love those walks, and maybe for you too, going out in the nature, because all the things that you may be thinking are wrong with the world and all around you, you look at the sunsets and the trees and you know the sounds of the animals and the birds, and like, how can you not think that things are okay, that things are going to be okay?
I think to build on that is not only that things are going to be okay, but you can learn about yourself.
Yeah.
I also in my struggles with anxiety, it was paralyzing. Like
Mm.
for a good example of that, getting back to the nomad thing, especially in the beginning, I really had to rely on going through a drive-through to order dinner at the
Mm.
end of the day. But I was so lost in the anxiety and everything else that I couldn't do that. So there would be many days that I would go hungry.
Mm.
I would want to eat, but I just couldn't bring myself to not only make a choice,
Yeah.
but then to express that to somebody. And I thought about that one day when I was out hunting. It was distinctly November 15th, because that's always the peak of the deer rut or
Mm-hmm.
deer
Mm-hmm.
breeding season. And when I'm out deer hunting, I've got a rule that I hold myself to. I got to have a connection with that animal. So I have to have seen him before. And this particular November 15th, it was miserable. It was cold.
Yeah.
There was a blizzard going on. This beautiful young deer come through. He had a nice rack and he was begging me, to take him, and making all kinds of mistakes because of the particular day he was out doing his job. And I thought about that for a minute. I'm like, I don't have the connection. I'm not shooting, but I call myself a hunter. What am I doing? And then that anxiety spoke up to me a little bit.
Mm.
And I thought about the context of what I was seeing and observing. He's out there doing his job, making all kinds of mistakes and risks and everything that puts his life in danger. And even though in our world, the reality is an anxiety attack doesn't represent life and death, feels like it, but
Yeah.
it doesn't.
Mm.
Well, Longhorn, as I named him that day, despite the fact that he was out there in those situations, he knew in the back of his head that should trouble arise, that he truly needed to protect himself. Those skills, those abilities, and the options were all in his head already, ready to go. And I thought about that. Then I put my label of, or my perception of anxiety together. And I realized, when I go through these things, I still have the skill set. I
Mm.
still have the ability. I can trust myself. I can step into the unknown that anxiety is making sound so scary, as long
Mm.
as I'm aware of what's going on.
Yeah. So you're talking about animals, and I have had people that I've interviewed that talk about leadership by training horses and also training dogs, and how that applies to how we do leadership. But what else, when you watch the animals in that complete wilderness nature, and what are they teaching you? What can we learn from them?
So each individual animal has a different set of traits or a different set of behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
And the Native Americans, they've attached different stories and different meanings behind it. So what it boils down to is it gets down to the idea of animal medicine is
Mm.
definitely the way that I look at it. animals kind of show up and come into a situation or your line of sight for
Mhm.
different reasons. And if you think to those patterns and those behaviors, you can kind of see a representation of traits within yourself, whether they're strengths or their weaknesses. And you not only get to explore that, but they all have a common thread where each animal has its own set of strengths, its
Mhm.
own set of weaknesses. It doesn't take those strengths for granted, and it does not look down upon the weaknesses. It keeps a level, balanced circle as it operates through life.
Mhm.
And that's something that each of us would do very, very well to learn from, is how to keep that balance, how to enjoy the strengths that you have, but not get caught up in them to the point that your ego takes over.
Mhm.
And also your weaknesses, embrace them, learn from them, develop them, and ultimately understand that without one, you can't have the other.
Mhm. Right.
And then to build on the idea of animal medicine and how it applies, the story of the journey of the wolf is a beautiful example of that, because we look at the wolf as a bloodthirsty killer. We think he has a lust to kill. Well, the reality is that couldn't be any further from the truth. We don't see all the failures that the wolf has to endure.
Mhm.
The wolf, he fails more times than he succeeds, but that failure, it holds a very deep context and meaning for him, because it means starvation, ultimately could mean death.
Mhm.
Victory represents a meal, it represents life, right? And he thrives on that. He, instead of turning toward the failure and letting himself starve to death, he embraces that lust for life, and he goes back and he tries again. He learns from those failures and those setbacks. And that's where we would do very, very well to look at that story and understand that perspective, because we all deal with our successes in life. We get beat down by the failures,
Mhm.
but there's a lesson there, and
Yeah.
it becomes like a staircase where each time that you fail, you still have the opportunity to turn into that failure, pick up the lesson, and move to that next step.
Awesome. So before we end, I just wanted you to mention a little bit about your adventures and your camps that others might want to look into.
Well, I do it in two different ways. I do it digitally through my podcast and my video series, which is
Mhm.
Project Mindfully Outdoors. You can find the podcast everywhere. Look it up on YouTube, all that good stuff. But the part that really resonates the most is the mindful hiking experience. I do those, like I mentioned earlier, in a class, like
Mhm.
a group setting. And I also do the one on one or the couple of people group backpacking full on adventure. You can sign up and look into that through projectmindfullyoutdoors.co, and everything that you need to explore wilderness meditation can be found there as well. That's kind of what I call the base camp of wilderness
Mhm.
meditation.
Who would be typically your client or customer for that?
So my ideal client would be somebody that is understanding their self-talk, could use a little improvement,
Mhm.
their habits throughout life use a little bit of improvement, or just somebody that's looking for adventure,
Mhm.
because there's growth and there's learning through every second of every day.
Mhm.
And when you put the tagline of adventure, there's so many thrill seekers out there in this world that would benefit from
Mhm.
these skills and these abilities. So it's not something that's aimed just at somebody that's going through a healing journey or a recovery journey. It's somebody that's just looking to live life and come into the moment.
Well, if you out there have enjoyed the conversation with Mike as much as I have and want to connect with him, we're going to share my slide. As always, for those that are just listening, you can go ahead and grab that paper and pencil real quick. But if you are watching, you can get a screenshot. As always, all the show notes will be on my YouTube channel, Vicki Nettling. So please subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com website. So as Mike said, his website is projectmindfullyoutdoors.co. Again, that's projectmindfullyoutdoors.co. On Facebook, he is Project Mindfully Outdoors Podcast, and Instagram is my Project Mindfully Outdoors _PC. On YouTube at Project Mike Martin, and TikTok is the same at Project Mike Martin. And I will turn it now over to Mike to talk to you about his call to action and a newsletter that he has that you might be interested in. Mike, it's all yours.
So I'm going to start with the call to action because this is like the inspirational side of the storytelling that I do. Daniel Boone left behind a very powerful quote, is the fact that we're never lost. We might get turned around in the woods for 2, 3, 17 days. Who cares about the number? The truth is we're never lost. We always find our way back. And when you bring wilderness meditation into your practices, you're ultimately remagnetizing that compass that you're following that's led you astray. So you can find your way back to your true, authentic north. And in our world, north is where the true knowledge lies. That's where the true wisdom comes from. We turn to north to help us grow, to help us work through situations, or discover answers for questions that have been plaguing us for a long time. And when it comes down to things that I can do to help you, obviously we've got the website, we've got the podcast, the online aspect of that also leads into one-on-one meditation classes and mentoring. Then there's the in-person groups, which, if you're not in my area, that's cool. We'll figure it out. You contact me and I'll come to you. I love adventure. I love travel, and seeing new sights myself is always fun and amazing. So I'm here to authentically help and bring this together because this is based off of my own experiences and my trek back to getting on my own 2 feet. What I also do outside of the 7-day-a-week podcast is I have the newsletter, as you mentioned, which I'm a little behind on right now. I'm trying to get caught up, but by the middle of August, we're going to be back to sending that out 7 days a week. And that's filled with not only wisdom and things from the adventures and the trails that I go on, but also tips and tricks to help you enjoy your own experiences, build your adventure, and most importantly, build and connect with that one unique adventure that's out there. And that's this journey of the human experience that you get to be a part of.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, it's just been a real pleasure meeting you and chatting with you about the outdoors. I heard the birds chirping in the background, so nice, and glad that we had the time to share all about what you do. And hopefully we'll have our audience visit your website to learn more about it and check out your YouTube and Facebook podcast. That would be fantastic. So as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Nettling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Nettling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.